Welcome to the Truth Over Comfort show. Today, again, I will be talking about the UK's relationship with the Gulf states, stemming from the conversation in the media and the general population about the Qatar World Cup and the issues around it. And I previously did a video on the UK's relationship with the Gulf states in military links, because what I found interesting is in this discussion about sports washing, the human rights abuses, the migrant workers abuses, and all the allegations about that is the topics that were left out. Sure, if you want to talk about sports washing on one hand, but what never was really discussed and still hasn't really been is the extensive military links we have with these countries. Bases all around the Gulf states and the Middle East. Huge amounts of arms being sold to these nations, having troops and officers embedded in their military training and advising. The UK has had troops in the Saudi National Guard since the 60s, so this relationship goes back extensively, and basically being partners in crimes with countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia in overthrowing governments like Libya, attempting to in Syria and Yemen. Obviously, the UK, France, NATO countries, and the US are extensively involved in the Yemen war with arms and training, and arms companies like BEA Systems having engineers there and things like that could literally be its own video. The UK having two joint squadrons, RAF squadrons, with the Qatari Air Force. Haven't had any since World War II. We actually did do security with their Air Force for the World Cup, which was interesting. Didn't really hear that discussed either. And today I thought I would do the economic links, because the military links are extensive, but they go hand in hand with the political and the economic. And I really didn't realize just how extensive it was. So I understood that obviously the Gulf nations would have money in our country, as other foreign governments do. Russia obviously being picked on recently for having, we need to get this money out of London and the influence, but all the money from the Gulf states, they want to keep it going. They want more cooperation. But I didn't realize some of the household names that they was invested in or outright owned. And again, this is all the Gulf nations. It's mainly Qatar and Saudi Arabia, but also Oman, Bahrain, the UAE with Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and you could even throw Jordan obviously in there as well. But I haven't got any of that today. But military links with them are fairly strong. But I'm going to jump straight into it because there is quite a few. I'm going to try and go through it fairly quick because I don't want to make it too boring, but hopefully, some of the names will perk your interest as they did for me. This will be more for UK viewers, as some of these companies you're probably not going to know. You might know some of the names of organizations, buildings, hotels, and football clubs. So this probably is more for the UK. Again, with the US, you could do a whole other video because obviously they're invested, but there is US companies in here too, so hopefully you'll still find it interesting. I recommend people check out my interview with Richard Grove, which is just there on the screen. We talked about the Rothschilds, British American history, some powerful families, and some interesting topics around that. And my interview before that I did last week or 2 weeks ago with Matthew Ho, who is an ex-Afghan and Iraq veteran. He also worked for the State Department in 2009 in Afghanistan, and he famously resigned in protest as the first US government official to do that against the Obama surge. He was full of knowledge, obviously first-hand personal experience, and then also post knowledge of researching it. So I really recommend that interview specifically, but also the one with Richard. I hope to have both of them on soon, as they was very enjoyable interviews myself. Ooh. Right, let's jump straight in. So this actually comes from a House of Commons library publication about the UK relations with the Qatar in 2018, and this stems from when Saudi Arabia wanted to and did put a blockade on Qatar as they had a dispute. I'm not going to discuss that. I'm not too familiar with it myself, so there's no need for me to try and butcher what actually happened. So feel free to look at that yourself. But I just thought I'd mention it because that is why this document was made, to talk about the UK relations with Qatar, the military links, the economic links, trade between the two countries, and oil and gas. Even mentions the World Cup. I did use some of this, and I think my video before for the military cooperation, but they list some interesting things here. So the Qatari Investment Authority is their sovereign wealth fund. Many countries have this. It's estimated theirs is worth 320 billion, and that they've invested 30 billion in the UK. And again, this is in 2018. And it might not cover the full extent, because I'm sure some are in shell companies and go through tax havens and different things and different names, but that doesn't matter because we have some interesting things here that they've listed. So straight out the bat, they say Qatar has 879 commercial and residential properties in London. That's obviously a huge number, and that includes the Canary Wharf Group, Chelsea Barracks, the Shard. For people who don't know the Shard, I will check this after, but I'm pretty sure the Shard is still the tallest building in Europe. I'm pretty sure it is taller than the Eiffel Tower, and it's in London Bridge, in obviously the heart of London. It's quite a famous building now in the UK because you can see it from many locations in London. So if you ever get too drunk and you are lost in trying to find London Bridge Station, follow the Shard and you'll basically get there. They also have the HSBC Tower, Harrods. Harrods is a very glamorous, posh building that sells, fancy perfumes, food, TVs, a bit of everything, marble floors, sort of butler-looking people in, full suits and the hat. Bit of a strange place. People like it. I didn't really like it myself, but that is a different issue. Very posh. They also have a stake in the Savoy Hotel. They have it in Claridge's, Berkeley, and Connor Hall, and Intercontinental on Park Lane. I don't know some of those myself, so feel free to look them up. One of them is interesting here, and this is going to be very British. Sainsbury's. So Sainsbury's and Tesco's are like British supermarkets. So you have Asda and Lidl and Aldi now that are here, but they're obviously foreign, Lidl and Aldi being German. Asda being American, used to be part of Walmart, but Sainsbury's and Tesco's is like very British. They have very British adverts, and when you find out that Qatari Wealth Fund has a 22% stake in Sainsbury's in 2018, it is a bit lower now, which I'll show you. It is quite interesting because it just shows obviously how interconnected all these companies are with, it's not a British company anymore when you look. So I'll get into that in a second, but that one is interesting. I didn't know that. I don't think many people in the UK shopping around that very British supermarket getting their Christmas turkey, and it's actually, the highest shareholder is Qatar, who they might have, just been moaning at the World Cup being there, and then they go to Sainsbury's. Again, that's why if you do have a moral objection to things like this, it's good to know, obviously, who owns it and has shares in, if you have a problem with that. Then you have 20% in London Heathrow Airport. That's sort of, again, near where I live, which is interesting to know. I didn't know that. And also they have a 20% stake, Qatari Airways does, in IAG, the owner of British Airways. And I'm pretty sure Qatar Airways is the sponsor or an advertiser on Sky Sports as well, which is interesting. And then 6% in Barclays. So I'll quickly just show you the Sainsbury's bit, but obviously it was 22% in 2018. It is now about 15%. And this company here, Visa Equality Investment, I had no clue who they was, looked them up. They're a Czech investment firm. You should know BlackRock if you're probably watching this. They are, along with Vanguard and some of the, Morgan Stanley, some of the biggest investment companies in the world. BlackRock and Vanguard are basically the top shareholders of every big company in America and some in Europe and the UK. Like, they have taken over. It's scary. Media, military, tech, pharmaceutical, whatever it is. I am going to do a video on it at some point because they have literally taken over and it's pretty nuts. Schroders is British and this is an American firm, but we'll move on because this is, again, beside the point. This one, again, is for UK viewers and even more specific if you're from the Southeast, which I am. I'm from Kent. And I found this out, I say about a year ago now. Basically, when Parliament voted that water companies could dump their sewage in the rivers, there was a bit of an outrage. And I was like, who even is our water company? So I looked it up, Thames Water. So they do the Southeast from the River Thames in London. So I was like, okay, who are they? Who are their shareholders? Well, their biggest shareholder is Canada's pension plans of 31%. Then you have a British one. And then, oh, who's that? A subsidiary of Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. And again, one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, owns almost 10% of that company. So imagine a water company in Southeast England, not a national company, literally in a specific area from the Thames to where I am. And there's, it's being voted on in Parliament. You're like, no, but the water companies care. And then they're like, oh, but like, the shareholders are from Canada, Abu Dhabi, and as you'll see, I'll show you here, China Investment Corporation have almost 9%, which maybe will be flagged as Russian money has in the Cold War coming up, 0.20. But again, yeah, how can you own a water company when, sorry, not own, have shares in a water company and you're sitting in Abu Dhabi and you're like, I really, really hope that water's clean in Kent. Yeah, those poor Kent people, like, it's just not going to happen, is it? It's just, and it also shows if you're investing in a water company in a specific area, it's because it's a good investment. So you're probably going to get money back. They're not doing it maybe like some environmental stuff of some charities where it's purely, just for the good of the environment. They're not putting shares into it for water for people in the Southeast, are they? But again, side issue. So this is McLaren, and it's interesting how they put this on their own website. So now the largest shareholder of the McLaren Group is the Bahrain, I'm going to butcher this word, Mumtalakat Holding Company, the sovereign wealth fund of the Kingdom of Bahrain. In other words, McLaren is primarily owned by the royal family of Bahrain, though it remains a public company. It's quite interesting how they put that in. They literally say, in other words, McLaren is primarily owned by the royal family of Bahrain. Again, interesting to show it's not, just Saudi Arabia and Qatar. So you have City Football Group here. So they own a number of clubs that I didn't know, but the one I knew was Manchester City, and they are one of the biggest clubs in the world now, and the Premier League. They've won the league the last 3-4 years, competing with Real Madrid, Barcelona, if you follow your football. They are owned by the Abu Dhabi royal family, which is interesting. But again, they have investments in, so here you go, Manchester City, New York City FC, Melbourne City FC, Mumbai City, like just clubs everywhere. So these sovereign wealth funds obviously get into everything. But again, with football, Saudi Arabia just bought Newcastle. The Qataris own PSG, Paris Saint-Germain in France. Obviously, there's a bit of talk there with the Qatar World Cup final. Messi plays for PSG and Mbappe plays for PSG, and they both end up playing each other. I'm not saying that's rigged. I think that would be pretty much impossible to pull off and probably not much need to. But there was obviously talk about that. But again, yeah, this money is seeped into football clubs everywhere. But, even like Manchester United or whoever, Arsenal, it's American money. So make of it what you will. There's not many UK firms that have bought football clubs. So this is interesting. I'm going to fly through this one. It's a Forbes article about Saudi investments in 2020, and this when the COVID pandemic started and lockdowns and things like that, and obviously certain companies and funds thought this is a good time to buy up shares, when they're a lower price in these companies. So who do they do? So Saudi Arabia's public investment fund has bought 8.2 billion worth of new investments in global stocks, which is pretty nuts. So I'm not going to read all the percentage for all of them, just the first few. It's in order. BP, obviously British Petroleum, one of the biggest companies in the world and in the UK. 8% Boeing, arms company. 7% Citigroup, obviously investment firm. 5% Facebook, Marriott International, Walt Disney Media, Bank of America, Royal Dutch Shell, Newcastle United, Canadian National Resources, Total, which is a massive French oil and gas company competing with Shell, BP, Chevron, Mobil, ExxonMobil, Pfizer, IBM, Starbucks, a lot of big companies there. Obviously, you Americans should know most of those companies as well. So a few there for you. You have HSBC Saudi Arabia being set up between the HSBC and a Saudi branch to basically manage their interests there. And again, Foreign Secretary visits the Gulf. So I highlight this one because there's obviously a big political relationship, diplomatic as well, backing each other in the UM. But all this talk about Russian money, we need to get it out. They're authoritarian, they invade their neighbors and aggressive nature. We can't have that money in Britain polluting, the minds of the people and influencing politics and all that nonsense. But no worries. They want to increase economic cooperation with the Gulf nations because they're not authoritarian. They don't invade neighbors and bomb neighbors or try and overthrow governments or fund terrorism. No. They're fine. It's Russia. The Foreign Secretary sees both Saudi Arabia and Qatar as important partners in deepening the UK's economic, technology, and security and defence ties with friends and allies around the world. This was Liz Truss when she was Foreign Secretary before she was Prime Minister for that short time. Closer security and economic ties with the Gulf allies will help us deliver jobs and opportunities for people back in the UK and ensure as friends and partners that we're operating from a position of strength in the world. Do you know what else would increase? Deliver jobs? The same Russian money and cooperation with it, but no, I can't do that. Again, I'm not saying we should have Russian money, but if the argument is it's going to deliver jobs and that's the justification for working with these nations with completely different values to us, then I don't know how you can make it about Russia, really. I want a closer trading and investment relationship with the Gulf and for us to collaborate more closely on issues like intelligence sharing, development, security, and defense. Sure, if you want to do an intelligence sharing and it's legitimately to stop terrorist plots and crime, that big national disasters, stuff like that, that's fine. But intelligence sharing, is it spying on neighbors for the purpose of espionage and overthrowing governments? That's a different issue, isn't it? That's using our tax money with these nations to basically make the world back like the empire days. Again, I'll start closing up soon. The UK set up a secret group of top officials to enable UAE investment. Project Falcon included tactics such as involving Tony Blair as a lobbyist for the UAE in 2013. Good old Tony Blair always crops up, doesn't he? So I don't know if I'll read all of this, but ministers set up a secret Whitehall unit that gave the UAE privileged access to Britain's political elite, prime land deals, and world-famous institutions in academia and NHS. The Guardian can reveal. I couldn't find this anywhere else. The Guardian saying they're revealing this. Seems like no one else really wanted to comment on this or advertise it to the public. The 10-person team of top officials named codenamed Project Falcon was put together in the summer of 2013 for the UAE, a federation of 7 absolute monarchies dominated by oil-rich Abu Dhabi, to try and ensure the Gulf state would spend its money in Britain. Falcon was created to deal with non-defence investments. It was overseen by the Tory Treasurer Minister Paul Deighton and run by a Director General in the Civil Service, Michael Boyd. Its dealings were never made public. However, extensive freedom of information requests and speaking to key sources in Whitehall and business, The Guardian has established for the first time that Falcon officials and Lloyd Deighton produced a beauty parade of projects to be proffered to the Crown Prince's Investment Fund an extraordinary secret meeting on July 13th with Tony Blair, who acted as a lobbyist in London. Whitehall intervened when one of London's top universities provoked a crisis by questioning a 60 million donation from the Emirates, and talked about how Manchester Council kept it quiet, and obviously Tony Blair was involved in this. And the next thing I had up was, this was around, that was a 2015 article talking about 2013. Financial Times always covers this up, but you have to pay as soon as you click it. I should have gone on to it first. But anyway, Johnson woos the UAE to London projects. And it says how Boris Johnson joked about the UK being the 8th emirate of the UAE, as in the 8th country, which is quite funny for him to do. And then I'm just going to list a few more things that we're involved in. Obviously, there you see, supermarkets, oil companies, arms corporations, football clubs, water companies, car companies. And again, that's not everything that was actually involved. And, obviously the media as well. So the Independent has a Saudi investor has a 30% stake in the newspaper The Independent, which is interesting. Other newspapers is also taking money from advertising. The Financial Times did a advertisement basically about, trying to attract tourism and culture. And who it was advertising for was Saudi Aramco, which is Saudi Arabia's oil company, owned basically this the culture project, which they was advertising for. And you could also talk about the media's role in actually being quiet about these states, not talking about it too much, or making public how extensive the royal family's relationship in Britain is with some of these other countries. I think I'll leave it there, as it's definitely gone on longer than I planned to. I thought it was interesting myself. I hope that you learned something new. The standout ones for me on a very personal level is the water companies and Sainsbury's, as they're just near my house. BP and Shell and stuff like that's just expected. They're a massive company. They're British companies, but these big companies are obviously invested from places in America normally anyway. So that's not really a shock. But Sainsbury's was one to me. If anyone ever does watch this, feel free to comment any that I didn't list or any that surprised you. And check out my previous video about the military links, which you might find a bit more interesting yourself. I'm not going to do one really about the political side, because it's kind of obvious that between the two, and you can go on any embassy, UK and Kuwait or wherever it may be, on Twitter, and you'll just see, non-stop praise. Ministers who go there, ambassadors, is pretty clear. I am going to do one about the allegations and in private emails, in public statements, of the Gulf nations being one of the top funders of terrorism around the world, and in Syria and places like that. But I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good Christmas, and get yourself a nice little Jeffrey Epstein top. Obviously, just like Christmas decorations, just like Jeffrey Epstein, Christmas decorations don't hang themselves. So that's a good little top. Can get it made. It's worth it. Anyway, have a good Christmas, and I'll see you later.